Muito obrigada, professora Farias. Eu agradeço muito a invitação da doutora Faras e doutora Fortuna para fazer essa apresentação em português e em inglês também. Eu continuo em inglês, mas eu quero fazer uma introdução a minha tema no português aos momentos iniciais. A tema do meu discurso é a razão da experiência do bar exame norte-americana e a conexão com a nossa Constituição norte-americana e que coisa uno pode fazer para participar como advogado nos Estados Unidos. Thank you very much, Dr. Farias and Dr. Fortuna, for the wonderful invitation to speak with all of you today. I am especially grateful to your kindness in allowing me to present in English, even though my heart will always be in Brazil and in Portuguese. Today, the purpose of my discussion is to explain the connection of our U.S. Constitution and how the organization of our federal and state system impacts the realities of the U.S. attorney and the reason for our bar experience in the United States. I hope that this will inspire many of you to consider the possibility of coming to the United States to study United States law and to become attorneys qualified in the United States, making you a truly international lawyer. So what is the connection between our Constitution and our states and that of the attorney that is practicing law in the United States? First of all, of course, the United States Constitution was built on a federal and state system. It is, of course, very similar to the 1988 Constitution of Brazil, creating two systems of law, a federal one and a state one. The regulation of attorneys in the United States is actually both federal and law, depending on the bar in which you are a member. Therefore, if you are licensed in the state of New York, such as myself, then you are regulated by the laws of the state of New York. But you are also, if you join a federal court, then you are also obligated by the ethics laws of the United States. And so that being said, it's very important that you understand that the nature of the U.S. legal system is to make sure that you are regulated within the particular state that you are practicing law in. Here in the United States, that means that you might have 50 different laws regarding the regulation of attorneys. And so when you are thinking about coming to the United States to study law, you need to take into consideration if you are studying where you will ultimately become a member of the OAB or the Bar Association here in the United States, because that will be specific to each individual state. So having said that, why come to the United States to study law? The first reason that you would come to the United States to study law is to internationalize your law degree. Internationalizing your law degree puts you in the position of learning a new legal system. It allows you to be exposed to a new legal culture, and it can improve your English language skills and your law problem-solving skills. This, in turn, helps your companies and your clients in Brazil to better understand the connection between U.S. law and the business that they conduct in the United States, and have confidence in you as an individual that you can interpret the U.S. law and be able to advise clients, including companies doing business in the United States, that they are in compliance with US law. So there are some things about the US legal system that I know will be very surprising to hear. And one of those is going to be what I'm about to say next. Differently from Brazil, the United States has only 198 accredited law schools in the entire country. So who does that? The body that credits law school in the United States is called the American Bar Association. And since the inception of that bar association, which is the National Bar Association, only 198 schools have been approved to teach the law of the United States to law students across the country. And I want to highlight a few of those right now that are in jurisdictions that I am actually a member of. So I'm actually a member of 3 bar jurisdictions here in the United States. I am a member of the Massachusetts Bar, which is where I live in the state of Massachusetts. I am also a member of the New York Bar. I'm a member of the New York Bar. And I am also a member of the Bar of the State of Connecticut as well. And this has been the case for over, I'm afraid to tell you, 24 years. So I have been a member of those bars for 24 years. In Massachusetts, there are only 8 law schools. Of those 8 law schools, there are some names that would be very familiar to you, and perhaps some that you might not be as familiar with. They include Harvard Law School, Boston University Law School, Boston College Law School, Northeastern Law School, Suffolk Law School, the New England Law, University of Massachusetts Law, and Western New England Law School. Just 8. In New York, there are only 16 law schools, for example. And I want to point out an interesting feature. 14 of those law schools are actually private universities, private law schools, and 2 of them are public. This is another feature that is very different from the Brazilian system. In the United States, private law schools are considered, whether rightly or wrongly, considered more prestigious than public law schools. And that's why you see 14 out of the 16 law schools in New York are private. They include some names that you also are likely to be familiar with. They include Columbia University, New York University, Cornell Law School, which is my alma mater, Fordham Law School, Cardozo Law School, and St. John's University Law School. And like I said, those are just the top 8 of the 16. There are twice as many. There are 8 more schools, including the 2 public universities, the City University of New York and the University of Buffalo Law School. So that being the case, that being so few law schools, what would be the consideration of what kind of qualifications were these limited number of schools have when looking at an international lawyer that would like to come to the US to study law? Well, the first avenue, the first path is through the JD, Juris Doctor program. The Juris Doctor is the traditional program that allows someone to go to law school for 3 years. And in order to enter that, you need no prior law degree. You would enter, though, by taking the nationwide law school admissions test, the LSAT. And that test would then give you a score, and that score very much determines whether or not you are able to go to law school at a particular university. And if you do the Juris Doctor path, you, of course, are going to be spending 3 years in law school. But this will also bring you the attention of the major law firms that are here in the United States and internationally, because this is the most traditional path and the clearest path, but it's not necessarily the most practical path. That path is more commonly the Master of Law, which is known as the LLM. And many of you who have seen me over the years know that I was the director of the LLM, both at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy in Tufts University, as well as the director of international programs at Boston College Law School, where I also taught. So my teaching experience also is from the past 12 years to a mainly international audience, many of whom are from Brazil. And of the students I have counseled, particularly those from Brazil, the typical presentation of qualifications is your LLB, your first degree of law, and your OAB membership. That OAB membership is not always required, the OAB, the Bar Association of Brazil. It's not always required, but it is definitely a positive plus for your application. And an LLM student has a limitation of really, depending on the law school that you attend, one major job fair that is available to you. And that major job fair is one that is going to most likely send you to the law offices of an international destination. So this is one way to truly internationalize your degree. There are some law schools that are allow you to transfer between the two programs. So you can start in the LLM and then continue with the JD, doing only 2 more years of the JD. It's sort of a combined LLM and JD. These are really special and really challenging opportunities, not available at every law school, and your grades at that law school during your LLM need to be very, very high. So to give you an idea, the point system in the United States goes from 1 to 4 when it comes to grades in law school. So a 2 is like a C, a B is a 3.0, and a 4.0 is a straight A, top scores. In my almost 13 years of experience in LLM programs, most international students will have between a 3.0 to about a 3.4. And that would be most people would fall into that range. That would be the average range, which is a very good score, but it is not a very top score. In order to make this transfer, you would need a 3.8 GPA, even if you if you are at a school that actually would allow such a transfer. I just want to add that even with that, you would still be required in most circumstances to take that law school admissions test and get a good score on that as well. So you cannot really avoid this national exam. And I want to tell you that national exam is very challenging to pass if you have not had experience in the US national testing system. The reason why I say that is the US national testing system is a very unique format. And children here in the United States, they get used to this format from a very young age. And they get used to practicing taking exams a certain way. So by the time they are ready to go to law school, they are learning the specifics of the LSAT, but they have an idea of the culture and the expectation and the environment of succeeding at an exam like that. So to take that exam and never having been in the US in the education system is very challenging. And that's something that's a consideration that often leads busy lawyers who are already practicing law or studying law in another country. They would just say, I'm not going to take an LSAT. It's challenging enough for me to take a TOEFL and get a good English score, and never mind taking another law school entrance exam. And that's perfectly understandable. So most people do take that LLM route. And I just want to say how much I love working with international students and how much international lawyers love participating in these master's programs. First of all, it is incredibly enriching. You are exposed to an entirely new legal culture. And of course, that can be challenging, but you are also in the company of international lawyers from all around the world. And really, frankly, wonderful administrators who I've had the pleasure of working with over the years, who are absolutely passionate about international education, and in particular, very committed to talking about and sharing a community with other people who care about the rule of law and constitutionality and democracy and freedom in general, including the freedom of education and exchange of information. So it's an incredibly unique environment, and it is sometimes exactly what you need, a break from working full time, to take a moment and invest in yourself, and to come and spend time and meet others and build your network, learning a new area. And a lot of people do also take the opportunity. For example, some people may have a spouse or they may have children. They take that opportunity to bring their families with them, and everyone benefits from that experience, because that, of course, means that your children and your partner are also learning English and possibly going to school in the schools for children here in the United States. And that is a very open-minded and open-ended education that really allows children to think creatively. So a lot of people are also very much motivated, because not only does it benefit themselves personally and professionally, but it also helps their family members as well. So what are some of the considerations then for thinking about what kind of law school, since there are 198 of them to think about? You have geographic considerations. For example, different parts of the United States have various strengths, various positives, and some drawbacks, time zone differences, cultural differences, maybe just how it feels to like live in a particular place. All of these are considerations. Some people want to be in a large city. Some people want to be in a very academic environment, where they're really like in a unique community. So there are various places around the US that are very special for different reasons, and you want to explore those ideas. As an independent law consultant, I am free to openly talk about all the different wonderful positives, as well as some of the drawbacks, because I'm independent and I'm not required to sponsor any particular institution. So I really enjoy the opportunity to share all the knowledge that I have learned over the many years of doing being the director of international programs, to tell you about what I think. And I always have. For those of you who've ever spoken to me about this topic before, you know that you always came first. And what was in your best interest was always at the top of my mind in priority. I'm even happier to do so now as an independent legal advisor for law schools. So consider other considerations besides geographic considerations are obviously a huge one is financial. How do you make it work financially? So there are a lot of considerations for this, but the first thing is to keep in mind that the law school in the United States is incredibly expensive because of the emphasis on private institutions. That means, of course, that it costs more money to go to a private institution. The range of the yearly tuition runs between 64,000 to 76,000 US dollars approximately per year, which is another reason why many lawyers, no matter how successful you are, really just want to take 1 year to do a master's program in the United States because it is very expensive. But I have some good news. Many law schools, and this is why you need an advisor, someone in helping you to understand behind the scenes what's really going on. You can get approximately half of that scholarship that will allow you to cut the tuition in half, meaning that whenever you're accepted into law school, you're also given a scholarship package of some kind. And so that will significantly lower the cost of your attendance. So do not immediately write off and decide that you cannot afford law school, because it is possible to negotiate with law schools about when you go to law school and how much you're paying for law school. You have to do it in a very special way. In my more than a decade experience, part of what I did was have those delicate conversations directly with students, and I can advise you very carefully on how to respectfully open a conversation about the realities of paying for law school for you individually, and of course, the overall consideration should you be coming with family members during your time here in the US. So I do not want you to be overwhelmed by the price of law school. It is part of the American experience to take on a certain amount of debt and also to obtain a certain amount of scholarship. And everyone does that in some way. The other pieces are to take into consideration in Brazil, in your home country, if you're not listening from Brazil, take a look at the scholarship opportunities that are locally available to you, and also researching scholarship opportunities that are available to you here in the United States for graduate students. So it is possible to look at those. They all have specific deadlines and application periods, so you want to kind of look at when things are due and think about yourself in a very, what makes you unique in a way that would help you to obtain some of those scholarships to help you get ahead in terms of the financial cost of law school. The other consideration is academic, and I cannot emphasize this more. This is actually the most important after all is said and done. I know that the other considerations that I gave are very important ones, but at the end of the day, you are getting a legal education. Therefore, it is in your best interest to get the very best legal education you can. Considerations are, what is the ranking of the law school? There is a lot of controversy over how these rankings are created and what kind of data goes into the ranking system. And many schools will question how they are placed in the system, and many schools will do things within their administration to change some of the data internally, make those changes so that they actually earn a higher ranking. And when you put it that way, it makes sense and it is reasonable for the schools. But you have to really look at a particular school and say, what does the school offer that is so important that I really need to be at this particular school, And so the topic of consideration has to be the area of law that you're interested in. Who is the professional expertise in that field? Who are the respected professors who are doing that work? And you want to be where those people are doing their research. You want to become the research assistant to that person, if possible, while you're in law school. You want to write a paper for or under the supervision of that particular law professor while you are in law school. So that academic excellence really should be the top criteria, even though there are several logistical considerations that are unavoidable at times, such as the financial consideration. But that should not be your ultimate goal, in my opinion, if you're pursuing that academic experience. So therefore, getting the highest scholarship may not necessarily be in your best interest. There really is a range, and you want to weigh the balance of the pros and the cons of why you would make a choice like that. And I think that is another place where you would want somebody with experience and knowledge in the field to really give you a perspective on whether it's worth it to save $5,000 or $10,000 or potentially be in a particular law school environment. The other considerations are immigration considerations. Now, I have to say a few things about immigration right up front. First of all, every individual person's immigration situation is unique. Therefore, it's important for you to consult with a U.S. immigration lawyer when you are considering both how you enter the United States and what your plans may be for after your master's degree. In addition to that, it's very important to state that the law here in the United States in immigration changes all the time. And therefore, it's incredibly important that you do consult with your own U.S. immigration lawyer so that you can be aware of the most recent developments in the law as you progress through your experience. So, having given those caveats, I will now say a few general points about the contact between immigration law and your experience in a U.S. law school. I am making an assumption that you do not already have a particular immigration status in the United States. Let's just assume that. I know some of you may actually have different status, such as a green card or U.S. citizenship. And if that's the case, then I'm happy to discuss with you what those ramifications are. But for most of you, I'm assuming that you would be coming to the United States for the first time to study. And if you're studying as a researcher, like as a professor, you would be under a different format. That would be the J1 format for researcher. What I'm talking about today, attending law school and getting grades for law school, and potentially the end goal of becoming a member of the bar in the United States, you would need to be a student. And for that, you would be getting an F1 visa. An F1 visa is a student visa, meaning that the visa lasts for the time that you are attending school. And therefore, it is not a visa that leads to a permanent status in the United States. That alone is not going to be sufficient. And in fact, it is the intent, as the Department of State understands it, that if you are coming on a student visa, then you would be returning home at some point. So it is what we would call not an immigration visa, meaning you're not immigrating to the United States. You're coming to the United States for the purpose of study. And it therefore lasts for the period of time that you're in law school and for a 60-day grace period thereafter. And for most LLM programs, you're also allowed to arrive 30 days before the start of your program. So it's approximately a year of time in the United States. After that period of time, but while you are still within that period, you can apply for something called optional practical training. And if you are employed by somebody during that time, whether it's paid or not, you have a visa opportunity to remain for one more year after you finished your degree of your F1. So that's kind of the very, very, very general, broad perspective. It is also possible to transfer your F1 visa from one law program to another law program, and I have met students who have done 2 LLMs or have gone for English language program and then transfer to an LLM. I just want to say about that you must keep in mind that regardless of the transferability, timing is everything. You have to time it before your program expires. And also, you have to show that you're able to financially be able to remain and afford to live in the United States during the time that you are here. So these are important considerations. There's another reason why somebody might consider doing the OPT, in addition to the fact that you would be working under this particular optional practical training period. It is also convenient to have it because you might also be pursuing the qualification of entering the bar here in the United States. So this would give you the time to physically be here in the US and actually take the bar rather than leave and then come back just for the purpose of taking the bar exam itself. Okay, so it's just a more comfortable time period in which to function. One other thing about the composition of LLM programs, they tend to, like I said, they start typically in August with a type of introduction and phase of just introductory trainings and orientation. And then they typically have graduation in the middle to the end of May. Within that span of time, you would have 2 semesters and a total of 24 credits typically, but you can actually do more depending on how your school calibrates, how they calibrate the charges of your semester. So you might be able to take a little bit more than 12 credits per semester. And if you're thinking about the bar exam, you will be thinking about what kind of classes that you need to be taking and what kind of classes are required for a concentration in a particular area, and what kind of classes are required for the bar. So ultimately, there are ethics courses, practical courses, legal research and writing courses. And you have to balance between what the bar is going to require and what you might want to pursue as an attorney. So if you love intellectual property law and you want to take the bar, you really have to balance classes in intellectual property with traditional law school classes that introduce you to basic principles of the US legal system, because the bar is not going to test you on intellectual property. You may need that, though, for when you go back and work in Brazil for a Brazilian company that wants to copyright or trademark around the world. But as far as the bar is concerned, they're interested in your fundamental courses in US law. So a very good advisor will help you balance all of that. And I frequently do that still to this day, even unaffiliated, but independently for students, help them to create a program of study that really works for their personal reasons. And I have time to be able to do that, and I'm not under the pressure of running in administration other duties that would compromise my ability to counsel students one-on-one. So choosing a law school has to do with the quality of the school, the quality of the program, the freedom of your ability to choose those classes, the scholarship that you're going to get for them, and what goals you have for the reason for taking that master's program. So again, if you want to specialize in cybersecurity or intellectual property, there are programs available for that. But if you are looking to take the bar, then you're either looking for a traditional LLM or a mix of the two, where you can have an LLM with a concentration in an area of expertise that's not tested on the bar, which is my favorite, the compromise of the best of both worlds. And there's an art form to making that happen. Much of that has to do with reading the regulations before you join a law school. In other words, you could go to law school in Chicago, but you want to take the New York bar. That's fine. You just really need to know what New York bar requires in order for you to be eligible to even sit for that bar, and the time frame in which they required you to submit your credentials, your international credentials, which need to be translated. So you need time. This is all about planning ahead, thinking of at least a year in advance about where you want to become a member of the bar, understanding the regulations, and then looking at the law school programs to decide, okay, this particular program, so these are the top ones, and they will allow me to then also sit for a particular bar if that's what you want to do. So I'm going to turn my attention to the last half of my presentation is going to be about the bar itself, which is one of my favorite topics. So as I mentioned to you, why is that? Because I love to teach. So it's one of my favorite areas. And as many of you know, I have taught Introduction to the U.S. Legal System, and I've taught various bar subjects, including constitutional law and tort law, all over the world. In South America, that includes Brazil, of course, as well as Argentina, Peru, Colombia, Chile, and other places as well. And Mexico, excuse me. I don't want to forget my friends there. So I really have had a very blessed experience to be able to share my knowledge of the US legal system, and the bar exam experience is one of those places where I really enjoy tutoring one-on-one and helping students to be successful, because it takes more than just an LLM program to pass the bar. You can make it happen, but you really need tools. Every law student needs tools. American students who have lived here their entire lives and are doing the JD program spend thousands of dollars to take bar preparation courses, and even they often are challenged with passing that exam. It's intentionally difficult, and it's even more difficult for international students. The passage rate is roughly 50% for international students at the institutions that I have taught. Now, that may be different in other universities. So it's one of the questions that you would like to ask once you already receive your offer. Again, a strategy point that I would be helping you if consulting with you on how to navigate your conversations with the administration at different law schools. Choosing what questions to ask and when is incredibly important because of the leverage that you have, and what kind of information you want to make known, and what information you need to keep to yourself until you are ready to make a final decision. Okay, so why is the bar exam therefore such a difficult challenge? There are cultural reasons. There's obviously English language reasons, but on top of that, the bar exam is under a tremendous time pressure as well, even such that even American students who have been living here in the United States their whole lives are challenged to try to succeed at that exam. So with that, most states are fully integrated right now into what we call the Uniform Bar Examination. And this is organized by the National Conference of Bar Examiners, the NCBE, and they administer a massive 200 question, 6-hour long exam. You might think, oh my God, but you will be shocked to hear. So this is the third shocker, if you haven't already been shocked multiple times. The third obvious shocker is that that's a multiple choice exam. So the bar exam, which lasts several days, one of those days is a 200 question multiple choice exam for 6 hours. And many states have opted into administering that exam, and it allows the score to be transferable among the states that are participating in that system. Okay. In addition to that, you have aside from the UBE, and I should also mention that that bar exam is given in July and February of each year. In addition to that 200 question exam, you then also have something called the MPT, and that is another part of the exam where on the second day of the exam, you will be given 2 legal files, and you have 90 minutes to review the legal files and then answer 2 sets of questions about those legal problems as if you were a practicing attorney. So you might think that being a practicing attorney now could be very helpful. And my answer to that is it depends, because some of your legal instincts will be very helpful. But if you do not really understand the US law, you could very easily end up with exactly a totally different answer from what the actual US legal system requires. We all face the same legal problems around the world. No one is unique. No one country is unique. We all have real property issues, family law issues, corporation formation, criminal law, legal obligations, contract law. All of these areas are known to all of us across the world. However, we have civil code jurisdictions and we have common law jurisdictions. And the United States is a common law jurisdiction. It is a very different way of thinking about legal problems. And you really need to get comfortable with the language and the tone and the behavior of a US law attorney. And it is a very different animal. It is a very different kind of culture and a very different way of writing. So you need to practice that area. And that's one of the areas that is the most challenging for international students. Imagining that you would take an exam that is multiple choice to pass to become a member of the bar seems very counterintuitive. And then on the next day, you have something completely different, which is a very deep issue, and you only have 90 minutes to really resolve. So these two 90-minute questions are given to you on the second day, and takes the whole morning. And then in the afternoon, you come back and you have what we call the MEE, the multi-choice essay exam. And that is 6 30-minute essay questions on an even more diverse area of law, an expanded area of law. These are extremely time pressured. Can you imagine reading a legal problem and having only 30 minutes to answer? So that means that includes the time that it needs to read the problem and then write an answer for it and do that 6 times in a 30 minutes time period. It is a very time pressured portion of the exam. In addition to that, there is other times of the year when you can take other parts of the bar that are required for bar exam that are required. For example, all states have the MPT, which is the professional responsibility exam. Sorry, I meant to say MPT. My apologies. Yes, the ethics exam. I'm trying to translate into Portuguese in my head and it's not working. So the MPT is the ethics exam, and that's administered several times during the year. So it is a good strategic decision to take that exam while you're doing the LLM. Try a few times to see if you can pass. The sooner you can pass that portion, the better. You can actually pass or not and still take it again. The same is also true of the bar exam itself. Some states allow you to take the bar exam an unlimited number of times. Other states put a number of chances limitation on the number of times you can sit. For the MPT, you have several opportunities to take it, and you can continue to take it until you pass. You cannot be a member of the bar without passing, but it's another art to answering those questions that have to do with US legal ethics. And if you can imagine, again, there's a very strong cultural component to how to answer those questions that is part of US history and culture for how you deal with problems regarding the profession of law. So again, there you would want to have some help and some support in practicing that, even though it's a little bit, I wouldn't say a little bit less intensive because you have more control over when you take it and that you can take it with frequency. But you do want to be prepared and take a preparation course for that. It's a shorter period of time for preparation compared to for the rest of the bar. And then the other portion has to do with state law components. So for example, in the jurisdictions, just to give example, in New York, there's a New York law component. Massachusetts also has this, and it is an online exam in about 50 questions that are very specific to Massachusetts or New York law. You need to practice those and be able to pass. You have to get most of those 40 out of the 50 correct for example, in New York as a requirement in order to also complete that. In addition to this, and without sound, I don't want to overwhelm you, but there's a tremendous amount of paperwork necessarily involved. I mentioned earlier foreign qualifications. I mentioned all of your credentials, your grades in law school during your LLM that need to be submitted. You also need letters of good character and reference. So there are a lot of pieces to the bar in order to actually become a member. And obviously, it's, I can only say, very, very rewarding once you're able to get past all of the logistical requirements, as well as the satisfaction of having taken a bar and becoming a member of a bar that is internationally recognized. So in my case, the New York bar, for example, internationally recognized bar, it's like if I can put it this way, a gold standard, because no matter where you are in the world, everybody knows that you have passed the New York bar. You have this one thing in common, whether you are in Brazil or you're practicing in China or you're practicing in Colombia or you're practicing in France. So that's extraordinary. And the students that I have counseled over the years really find that tremendously gratifying to be able to connect globally with other lawyers who have had that unique experience. When do you get the satisfaction? When do you find out about the bar? This varies from state to state, as you might imagine. So for example, there are also differences in the administrations. So for example, the July administration, which comes right after that May graduation, right? So people graduate from the LLM and then the very next day they start studying for the bar. And that July examination, typically, it takes longer to get the results. So it's approximately 12 weeks. It takes about 3 months to get the results from the July bar exam. If you are taking the Massachusetts bar, for example, New York will let you know a little bit later. Actually takes them about 14 weeks to get back. And that's because of the sheer number of people that are taking the bar. It's just thousands upon thousands of people who are taking that bar. The February administration is shorter. It's about 6 weeks in New York. So you learn much, much sooner. And in Massachusetts, about 8 to 9 weeks. And there are some LLM students who are doing the OPT who take time during the OPT to take the bar in February rather than in July, not because it takes longer, it takes less time to get the result, but because it gives you more time to study. And that is a very interesting strategy that you can pursue. Whether you try to push everything as tightly together as possible so that you can get as much done as possible, or you can take time and actually pace yourself a little bit and add extra subjects of US law to your knowledge, learning independently or learning through a tutor, and then taking that February bar. So again, I can only state that it's so incredibly important to strategize with an advisor so that you have an idea of what you are getting involved at least a year before you study for an LLM, and that you have support during your LLM, and that you have tutoring assistance and one-on-one training for your bar exam preparation. It's the idea that you could take a group study and do the same result as an American student who's been living in the US their whole life and studying law potentially with JDs who've been studying for 3 years. It's just, you're starting with an unnecessary deficit, you could say. And the way to level that is to have the kind of one-on-one assistance that is specifically helpful to you. And that way you personally know how you learn best and how that person can best help you get through all of these many questions in the process of obtaining your goal at the end of the day, which is to have an internationally recognized credential. And that's by help of one of the bars here in the United States. So I want to mention a couple of other things. In between, you have the bar exam and law school. I want to mention something very particularly unique here in the state that I live in. So I grew up in New York. Most of my first, I don't want to say how old I am, but almost 30 years I lived in New York. And then almost the same amount of time I have lived in Massachusetts. So one of the interesting things here in Massachusetts, where I currently live, is that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts allows the credentialing of a person known as a foreign legal consultant. So this is independent of a US law degree. This is an individual who is here in the United States, obviously legally, for their own reason, who can provide legal services for Brazilian law issues to people anywhere in the United States, but you are based out of Massachusetts. You are providing Brazilian legal advice for Brazilian law issues to help people in Brazil, but you are located here in the United States. And that is the title of foreign legal consultant. You cannot go to court in the United States, and you cannot say that you are practicing law in the United States to people in the general public, nor can you actually practice Massachusetts, New York, or federal law, or any other US law. So it is limited in that regard, but it does allow you to advise. So some people take an LLM, they do not take the bar, or they're not yet ready to take the bar, but they are legally allowed here in the United States for a variety of reasons. They may be married to a US spouse, they may have a green card for different reasons. Whatever the reason, they're here in the US and they're able to provide legal advice for their home country credential and be here while they're doing that. And then if they choose to take the bar exam and they pass the bar exam, then the foreign legal consultant credential is subsumed by the bar exam passage. So then then that person can both advise, obviously, under Brazilian law as well as under US law. So some people have utilized that step prior to passing the bar exam with all of those caveats, which is important to review the regulations and understand whether or not how to be in compliance and to make sure you stay in compliance, obviously, with those legal requirements. But I thought you might be surprised to hear that and maybe also excited a little bit. I personally think it's a wonderful feature. And it's a very friendly jurisdiction, Massachusetts, for international lawyers. There's a few other things I want to say, very special. First of all, of course, I love my hometown of New York. I think it's a fascinating place to be and to live. There are many, many Brazilians living in New York. Of course, New York is an incredibly cosmopolitan city with people from all over the world. And you would have, I am sure, a wonderful experience going to law school there and taking the bar if that's what you wanted to do. But I also want to mention how wonderful Massachusetts is, my little plug for the East Coast. But because we have really an extraordinarily amazing, dynamic Brazilian community in Massachusetts. There are many towns in Massachusetts with Brazilian residents, and there are some towns that have a very unique, distinct Brazilian feel, almost like you never left home. And I think that is so special and unique. I personally love that. The town is right next door to where I live, so I was just there this morning. I really cannot say more positive things about what Massachusetts has to offer. But I can also say, obviously, there are many places across the United States that would be wonderful experiences. And all of those are unique and special to you as a person, and something that you need to reflect and consider for your priorities when you think about where you're going to law school and what your goals are for doing that as a credentialed Brazilian lawyer coming to take an additional degree in the United States. So I want to restate what would be the challenges. Obviously, there's financial challenges, there are language challenges, there are timing challenges, but really everything depends on the quality of your US legal training, your own legal research and writing, your personal commitment, a little bit of your skill in memorizing in the short term a large amount of information. But you will come out of it adapting to an international and foreign environment that will make you incredibly resilient. It will enrich your legal experience and your legal career. It may very well be an extraordinary personal journey, and it might be an incredibly enriching and personal journey for also your family members who can also benefit from this experience through you. So with that, I am almost at the end of the talk. I want to let you know that I am the founder, now that I am independent, I'm the founder of Vista Law Coaching, and part of the most important thing I do is helping international lawyers prioritize and strategize over where to go to law school, how to support your studying, your course selections here in your master's or JD experience, and how to strategize and coordinate for you successful bar exam passage. So as I said, with my 3 bar exams and more than 12 years of experience teaching and 25 years in the legal profession, I bring all of that experience into the context of helping you succeed in your journey to become a credentialed international lawyer through the US legal system. I hope that you would join me in that. And in the Bate-Papo, I'm going to put my email address, and you are free to reach out to me if you have any questions. If you would like to consult on any of these. I know I raised many important considerations today. It's part of the process that every law student has to do in order to find their success. So I'm happy to be available and of service. You can also find me on Instagram. I'm sure many of you have seen me there. And I'm happy to join you in whatever forum necessary to help you on your journey. I wish you the very best of success, the very best of luck and future for you and all of your loved ones. Thank you so much.